All right, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're here. We are in for a good treat. Miss DeLina Furr, if you don't know her, she's a history teacher from East Gaston, retired. And she is going to talk to us about the White House, inside the White House. We've all probably seen the outside, but we don't know much about the inside, do we? So we're excited to have her, and come on up and we'll get started. Yeah, you keep that on the mic.
Okay.
There you go. Now, this might just sit right in there.
Okay.
You get on the stool.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, you have to talk with the microphone. Use this, refer to my notes, so just bear with me. This is about the White House, a little something about the inside and the outside too. Congress decided to locate Washington, D.C. between the states of Virginia and Maryland. And it's right in this area here. Do you know why?
Mason-Dixon?
Close. That was all we were in 1792. We were 13 states. And they kind of put it right slap dab in the middle, and it did have something to do with slavery, Mason-Dixon line. But it's located right there because it's slap dab in the middle of our country. Of course now it isn't, but it was then. And this shows you the area, the exact area. And in that area, we have the White House. And there is 18 acres right about there that's surrounded by an iron fence. And in that area is the White House. And before we really get started, I don't know if you all know this, but that's the main White House. And today, that west wing and the east wing over here, those two are considered the White House too. But they weren't added until the 30s. So the White House is right here. And does anybody know who decided exactly where the White House was supposed to go? It was George Washington. And George Washington laid he laid the cornerstone. And he was the only president never to live in the White House. The only one. All right, the first, let's see if this is, they built the White House from 1792 to 1800. It took them that long. And it was designed by James Hoban, H-O-B-A-N. And it was built as, I want to say a square, but it's really, I guess, a rectangle shape. It's completely flat. There's no porches. It's completely flat on all sides. This side, flat. Arch window. This is not flat. That is a projecting bow. This side flat. This side flat. So it's a rectangle with a projecting bow on the south side. And that's a picture of it, the north side. That's the back side, the south side, and there's the bow. And then there is the diplomatic room here, and then there is the blue room, and above that is the yellow room. Okay, does anybody know what the White House is made out of? I thought this was interesting. It's made out of sandstone, and sandstone is an off-colored white material like that. It's off-white. And it's very porous. So when they first began to build it, they realized that they had to weather it, because if it rained and rain got in the crevices and it froze, then it would crack the stone. So they put a whitewash on it. And then, of course, we have the War of 1812. And we'll talk more about the 1812 war in just a minute, but in that war, the British invaded the United States and burned down the White House. And the only part that was left was an outside stone exterior. So what is this poor country going to do when we were poor? And the White House has been up for like 12 years and now it's burned down? Well, they hired Hoban again, and they built the White House back just exactly the way it was the way it was originally. But this time, when they rebuilt the White House, they used sandstone again, they used new slabs, they also used slabs that had been left over, and some of them were even scorched from the British fire. And the house looked like a patchwork. And so this time, instead of a whitewash, they used oil paint. And they painted it in a stark white. Now through the years, the White House has been painted many times. And it takes 570 gallons of paint to paint or cover the White House. And it's been painted many, many times. But today, we don't have a stark white house. We have a warm white. It's called whisper white. The second president of the United States was the first resident of the White House. He moved in 1800 and the interior still wasn't done by then. But he moved in, and the house was built by slaves, by free blacks, by immigrants, and employed Europeans, which meant they were craftsmen. The house was known as the President's House, Presidential Mansion, the Executive Mansion, and the White House. And by 1900, the White House won. It was the most popular, and it was made so by Teddy Roosevelt. Now today, the White House is the oldest federal building in Washington, D.C. It has 6 floors, 55,000 square feet, with 132 rooms, 35 bathrooms, 412 doors, 147 windows, 28 fireplaces, 3 elevators, a jogging track, a pool, putting green, a tennis court, bowling alley, and a movie theater. It's a fun place to be. It's also a serious place to be. Now today it is estimated, depending on what source you use, it is estimated that the value of the White House is between $400 million and $1 billion. The White House is a neoclassic building. And that means that it has columns, it has pediments, it's of a grand style, it has projecting bow, it has symmetry, it has simplicity, and it reflects the Greek and Roman architecture. On the inside, it was also originally decorated as neoclassic. The 2 presidents that you always think of when you think about the decoration of the White House is Madison and Monroe. And really it was Monroe that really had an eye for decor. And he created beautiful rooms. He was a sophisticated man. He traveled and he knew what he wanted, and he decorated it in the neoclassic style. Now the original White House was built as a 3-story house. That would be a story, that would be one, and that would be one. But it ended up a 6-story house. That room right there, or that floor right there, is called the ground floor, and it's half underground and half above ground. This is, these are the floors. Now this is today. There's a 2-story basement, a ground floor, a state floor, a second floor, and a 3rd floor. And they managed to create more and more space with every renovation that took place. If you want to visit the White House, you can go on tour, and you can only see the ground floor and the state floor. The tours are free, but you have to make an appointment through your congressman. And the tours last less than 45 minutes. There are no tour guides. It's a self-tour. There are Secret Service, though, they're stationed, that you can ask questions. And it's estimated that 30,000 people visit the White House per week. That's a lot. I thought the decor and the function of each room in the White House, now I'm only talking about the ground floor and the state floor. I thought that the decor and the function of each one of those rooms was decided by Monroe and men like him in the late 1700s, early 1800s style. I thought it was going to stay the same. Now, I knew the White House would change some with technology. I knew they had to bring in bathrooms and running water and central heat and air conditioning and gas lights, electric lights. And I knew that would change the White House some. And because of the passage of time, I thought, well, you know, they're going to have to repaint the walls. Well, I thought they'd choose the same color. And the sofas and the chairs had to be reupholstered, but I thought they'd at least get the same kind of material. And I knew the carpets would have to change, but I thought they'd find some weaver to weave a carpet that would be just exactly the same. And I certainly thought the furniture would stay, but I was wrong, big time. Because it just depended on what the president wanted, what kind of style would be incorporated. The rooms could shift in function. I mean, a sitting room could become a bedroom, and an office could become a kitchen. It just didn't matter. The president could change anything he wanted to in the public floors as well as the living quarters. Now, the presidents brought in different decors. The Victorian era, with the big ferns and the heavy tapestries and all that. Then they brought in the Art Deco, and then the Baroque, and then the post-war modernism. And the White House, really by 1900, didn't match the outside. It was getting further and further away from the neoclassic style. And one example of this was Chester Arthur's term. He was president from 1881 to 1885. He went through the White House and he didn't like anything. He went through it and 20 wagon loads of furniture and household items were sold at public auctions. And a lot of those beautiful chairs and tables were sold. And if you stand on your head, you can look at what happened. He hired Louis Tiffany, and Mr. Tiffany put in this grand screen in the entrance hall. And it was beautiful because it gave off an iridescent light, and it was just beautiful. And then some 20 years later, Teddy Roosevelt comes in and he didn't like it. So he took it to the public auction and sold it. So in reality, for 200 years, the White House has been in constant change. And some presidents came in and made structural changes, some just redecorated, some of them didn't do anything at all. The big story of the White House, of course, is that the functions that it had to fulfill increased. The lack of space became more and more of a problem. Because the White House was intended for a family, president and the family, his first family. And you just, as the country grew, you need more and more office space for the presidential staff. So renovations were on their way. And we're going to look at just a few of them. There were many renovations, but these are the biggies. The first one is Jefferson, our third president, came in, and he built the east and west colonnades. That's this area right here, and this area over here. And we didn't have the west wing, and we didn't have the east wing. We just had this and the 2 colonnades. And we didn't have anything, remember, there are no porches on the White House, no porticos. All right, then we have the War of 1812, and that was fought with Great Britain, and it was fought over control of the seas. And the British invaded the United States and burned down the White House. And the only thing left was just a partial piece of stone. And of course, they had to hire Hoban again to rebuild the White House. And when they rebuilt it, they added, in 1824, they added this portico over that bow, and this portico over the front of the White House. Now, the White House looks more familiar to us. In, let's see, 1829, yeah, that was the North Portico. All right, and let's go ahead to 1901 to Teddy Roosevelt. And he was the president in the first part of the last century. He began to modernize the White House. He wanted to reshape the White House so that it would look more like it did in the days of Madison and Monroe. But at the same time, he made a lot of structural changes to the ground floor. And again, this is the ground floor. Oh, I gotta take this with me. Ground floor, right here. That part right there, which is half underground and half above ground. And he wanted to make the rooms there more important and less of a basement, because they pretty much used the ground floor as a basement for a long time. And also, he built a west wing, and it's not the west wing we have today, but it is the west wing, this right here. Now know that this is really the west wing. That's the east wing. But the reason it was labeled that way is because the White House was turned around on the other side. This becomes the west, and this becomes the east. But anyway, he started the west wing because remember, they needed more and more presidential staff offices. And so he built this west wing for that. And then the next year, and the next term was Taft, William Howard Taft, and he built the Oval Office in the West Wing. And then in 1927, they raised the roof of the White House and made the attic into the 3rd floor. And remember, that was really the 6th floor. And then in 1929, we have another fire, and it burned down the West Wing. And it's going to fall to Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s to replace the West Wing with a bigger West Wing, because by that time there were more offices needed. President Franklin Roosevelt built the East Wing as well, and he also went into the main house and developed the map room to the diplomatic room, and he installed air conditioning and a pool. Then the big one came, the big change, the big reconstruction happened, and that is Harry Truman. From 1948 to 1952, he's going to supervise the largest complete reconstruction of the White House ever. He felt tremors in the White House. He could feel his foot give under his footstep. He could see chandeliers sway. And one day his daughter was playing the piano, and she saw the leg of the piano go through the floor. So he knew something had to be done. So he goes to Congress, and he tells them about it. And Congress has a team that comes out and looks at it. And they investigate it and tell Congress that the load-bearing walls and the wood beams were close to failure. So he was just living in a time bomb, really. All the renovations of the past had put a lot of pressure on the White House, and the stress was just too much. And it was due often to quick fixes, cutting corners, that sort of thing. And something had to be done. So, of course, they gutted the White House. And that's what the White House looked like on the inside. as they were doing the renovation. And that shows you 3 floors there. And then they began to dig basement, sub-basement. Okay, so that was the big thing. Then there's one more that I think is really big, and that's Jacqueline Kennedy. By 1960, Jack Kennedy was elected president, and Jackie Kennedy was his wife. And she came to the White House and said that she didn't see anything at all before the 1900. I mean, she looked at the White House and she saw nothing that existed, really. Very few things before 1900. And so she decided that she was going to do something about it. And she found out that that most of the antiques were gone. And she learned that many of the past White House furnishings were kept in government storage facilities throughout Washington, D.C. And she learned that a lot of presidential families kept some things, took it home with them. It wasn't against the law, but they just took things with them. And she found everything had just gone. And so she had a solution. And she does a couple of things that are real important. She established a White House, and that should be capital F, Fine Arts Committee, made up of experts in historic preservation and decorative arts. And together they located many pieces of furniture and artworks that had been owned by former presidents, and they persuaded many owners of historic furnishings to donate their pieces, and they bought suitable antiques. Mrs. Kennedy personally went through each White House storage room, unearthing forgotten pieces, had them restored and returned to prominence. And she found a bust of George Washington in the men's room. And she found a pier table that was used as a sawhorse, and the Resolute desk, which we'll talk about, and a pile of broadcasting material. So there were a lot of things that were misplaced, and she found them. And to avoid political controversy about money, taxes, she established the White House Historical Association. And this organization published the first official White House guidebook. And all the profits from this guidebook went for her restoration projects. They bought furnishings and other historical materials with this money. And this guidebook was definitely a success. And I've got 2 right here. Camille ordered one, and it is, this is mine, 2010. And then this is the one that Camille ordered, and it's 2019. And what's in this guidebook are the interiors of the White House. And a lot of these pictures I'll show you later came from here. And it's beautiful, beautifully written. And there have been 23 reprintings of this book. It's been around since the 1960s. And I think Jacqueline Kennedy, we owe a lot to her because she saved the White House. She really did do everything she could, and it wasn't just her, it was all these other experts. And they really did restore the White House to what it was like in the time of Madison and Monroe. And she conducted, and that's the kind of thing that they sold, and they finally got it back. But that's just beautiful. She also had a tour on CBS News. This tour that she conducted won her an Emmy. She did it on CBS with Charles Collingwood. And of course, I think I was in the 6th grade, and I just tuned in on Valentine's Day 1962 so I could see her, because I just thought she was fabulous. So these are the results. She restored the White House to its original elegance. She declared the White House a living museum. In 1960, she did this. Promised donors that the presidents were forbidden to give away their White House donations as gifts or to keep their donations for themselves. You remember, most of her idea was, since she didn't have that much money, was to get people to donate. And she had Congress make sure that they passed a law that says, look, you give us something, you give something to the White House, they're going to take care of it. And they're not going to sell it and give it away and that sort of thing. So she did that, and she set up a foundation for future administrations to follow in making changes to the public rooms. The presidents could no longer just on a whim change the public rooms just because they liked something. Okay, now the rooms, let's look at them. This is, we'll start at the bottom. There are 2 basements, and I never did understand how this basement worked. But I do know that some of this ends up in the ground floor, which is the floor above it. But this is a basement, and this is where all the mechanical stuff goes on, the air conditioning and the heating and air controls. And there's a lot of storage, and there are all sorts of things down there, but it is a basement. And then if we move up a floor, we get to the ground floor. This part right here belongs in the basement area, this part up here. This part up here is above ground. You can see this. And we're going to talk about the library, the Vermeil room, or the gold room, the China room, the diplomatic room, and the map room. And there are just a few things about this. There are 3 corridors. There's that one, the central hall, that right there. And then a floor above this one, there's another long hall. And the floor above that is another long hall. And they connect all the rooms. The library, that's the library. You know, most of the presidents had their libraries. They brought them from home and kept them while they were in the White House, and then they took them back home after their terms were over. And so they did this for years, and then in 1850, Millard Fillmore's wife began a collection of books that stayed with the White House, and then later Franklin Roosevelt found a place for the books, and this is the library. Then across the hall is the Vermeil room, and you all know what Vermeil is. It's a gold object that's been dipped in gold or gold plated. Well, there was a donation made to the White House in 1956. Margaret Thomas Biddle gave this to the White House, and Mamie Eisenhower accepted. And these objects include vases and cups and table service and that sort of thing. And you can see 2 right here. And they're spread out through the White House some, but the collection is held in the Vermeil room. And this shows you some of the pieces that are there. And these are not just museum pieces. They use this when they dine at state dinners. They use them for flower arrangements or, you know, just decoration throughout the White House. Then across the hall, no, next to that is a China room right here. And that room is designated for every China pattern that presidents have chosen. In 1917, President Woodrow Wilson's wife designated this room to show off the China. And like I said, every president chooses a pattern of China, and the China is held in this room, and the Historical Society buys that China. It's not the president, it's the Historical Society. And I don't know if you all remember Ronald Reagan's wife bought a set of China, and it was so terribly expensive, and there was a big uproar about it. But the Historical Society pays for this. And I guess I got so many pictures here, and I'll go through them fast. That's some of the China. This is some of the China that George Washington and John Adams had. And then we've got the more peculiar type China. And then I guess I've got so many pictures because I love China. But this is Pierce's China, this is Pope's China, Lincoln's China, and then the various ones, I think that's Clinton's and out of Bush, and then Grant has China. Did you see how the taste changed? Roosevelt, I remember I can't remember who that is. These are various pieces. Obama, and this is Johnson's. Okay, there are two main, The next room we'll talk about is the diplomatic reception room. And this is on the south side where that bow is. You go in from the south side into the diplomatic room, and this used to be the furnace room, and they changed it. And it is an entrance from the south lawn for visiting dignitaries and the Washington Diplomatic Corps. And it is an oval room, and it fits that bow perfectly. And this is what it looks like. Now, when Jackie Kennedy was refurbishing this room, she didn't have to do a lot to it, but she put up this antique wallpaper. And this antique wallpaper was mid-century French, and it shows different scenes of North America. In fact, it's called The Views of North America. And this is where, this is up still today, this particular, I mean, if you go there today, it's just like that. And that's been since Jackie Kennedy. FDR would deliver his fireside chats, his radio programs during the Great Depression, and he did it in this room. And then Bill Clinton invited several thousand ordinary people up to the White House, and he received them in the diplomatic room. And this shows him shaking hands with these ordinary people. This is right next door. It's called the map room, and this room is used as a sitting room today. But in 1941, out of nothing, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, made this into a map room, and it's really a war room. He had maps hung up all over the place, and he received sensitive information about the war, followed the campaigns and all that. And since, like I said, it's become a sitting room now, but they hang maps, valuable maps, on the wall still today, and that's why they still call it the map room. And you can see President Obama showing off one of these maps. But that's the map room. And then if you continue on in this floor, you find out that there's a kitchen. There are two main kitchens. There are other kitchens like pantries and things like that, but this is two main kitchens, and the main kitchen is on this floor, and they use it for preparation of state dinners and big, huge dinners. There's another kitchen on the second floor where the president and the first family eat their meals. There are other rooms on this floor. We've already gone over the library, Vermeil room, China room, diplomatic room, map room. There's a kitchen. There are other places. There's a doctor's office. The president has his own doctor. They have a housekeeping room. They see to the upkeep of the house. And the housekeeping staff are the butlers, the maids, the chefs, the cooks. These people used to live in the White House, but they don't anymore. They leave after their shift, they go home at night. There's a curator's office that was conceived by Jackie Kennedy, and there is a Secret Service office, a carpenter's shop, a chocolate shop. Anything you want to eat chocolate, they got it for you. And there's a bowling alley underneath the steps of the north lawn. I think about that every time I see the White House, that underneath the steps of that portico is a bowling alley. Now we're going to go up a floor. Up a floor to the state floor. We got the east room, the green room, the blue room, the red room, the state dining hall. And then there's the cross hall. And then you have this entrance hall right here. And that bowling alley is under there. That's the entrance hall. And it's a gathering room. And it's got Tennessee marble in a checkerboard style. It has columns. And right beside it is the grand staircase. You can see it right there, and part of it right there. And this is the grand staircase. President comes from the yellow room, down the step, he turns, and he spills into this room. It's a blurry picture, but that gives you an idea. And when he comes down the staircase, they play Hail to the Chief. And it's really a staging area for the president to be received. And he goes and receives his guests. Thomas Jefferson had another idea for the entrance hall. And that's what it looked like when he was president. And if you notice the walls, those are artifacts that were sent to him from Lewis and Clark, who were exploring the Louisiana Purchase, which we bought in 1803. And he put up all these things here. But that's what it looked like when he was president. Now we come to the biggest room in the house, and that's the East Room. And this room, there's the hall on that floor. This is the East Room. And this room is a multi-purpose room. And it's where ceremonies, concerts, other events take place. I love this sentence. It's an elegant space, richly finished, but sparsely furnished. And it changes. I mean, it just changes. It depends on what kind of furniture is going to be brought in for whatever event's going to take place. And this room extends from the north to the south, and that's 80 feet long, 40 feet wide. It's a huge, huge room. And is another shot of it. And I mean, you know, like I would probably stand from there to there. I mean, that room is huge. And there have been, in this East Room, 7 presidents that have lain in state, including Lincoln and Kennedy. And the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 was signed here, and so was the Camp David Accords in 1978. Ford's daughter, Beryl Ford's daughter, had her prom here. She was in high school at the time, and they held the prom there. There have been weddings here, there have been some inaugurations here, and it is where Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, hung her laundry when she first moved in. That's where she hung her laundry. Now, the oldest thing in the White House, hangs in this room, and it is the picture of George Washington. This is Gilbert Stuart's picture that he painted. And that's the one famously Dolly Madison saved, you know, as the British were burning down the White House. She got the portrait, took it out. Really, her people who helped her, her servants, are the ones that actually took it off the wall. But she saved it. And we have it as a result. And then, of course, we have the piano. And this is Theodore Steinway gave this to FDR in the 1930s. And this right here shows you the different dance forms in America. And then there are 3 eagle-shaped legs that go with this piano. And this shows you another view of it. But it usually stays in the East Room. Then we come to the famous red, white, I started saying red, white, and blue, the green, the red, and the blue rooms. And of the 3, the blue fits in that bow in the White House. And, excuse me, today, these 3 rooms are used for small gatherings like teas and interviews and things like that. And they serve also as art galleries for showing off all the American art that is in the White House. And in the early 1960s, Jackie Kennedy set the tone for decorating these rooms. And they're all known for their textiles and the wall coloring. That's where they get their name. Many official White House Christmas trees have stood in the center of the oval blue room. And like I said, it fits perfectly into that projecting bow. I've got some pictures, and I want you to see how these rooms change through the years, how they're decorated differently. This is a green room, and this is another shot of another decoration. And notice that color of the walls. And that's the green room in the 1800s. It has a bit of a, what do you call it, Victorian era look. There's the red room. It's only slightly changed. These pieces of furniture are beautiful. They're back, they imitate Madison and Monroe's time. Now this is a blue room. And this is a blue room. Same room, blue room, blue room, blue room, blue room, blue room. And that is 1800s state dining room. So we moved to the second largest room in the house, and that is the state dining room. Heads of state, prime ministers, ambassadors, all are entertained in this room with a 4-course meal. It used to be 6 courses, but now it's about 4. And it's where the president can seat 140 guests or 1,000 guests standing eating hors d'oeuvres. Strict protocol at these dinners, and I'm sure some of you see these on TV, on news, where they show the state dining room. Like I said, strict protocols observed. And these people sit by rank, they give toast, they dress formally. And it's a beautiful room. This is how it's been improved. It's been, paneling has been painted. And that's the way it looks today. And there's another decoration of the same room. And notice Lincoln, his portrait's always in the state dining room. And then they decided they could sit more people if they had round tables instead of several long tables. And this is what that would look like. There the Obamas ready to entertain. But this is the state dining room, and right next door is a family dining room, and it's actually called the family dining room. And it used to be where the president and the first family would eat their own meals when they ate in. But nowadays they don't use it. They use the second floor room. But it is on this floor. Now we're going to move up one floor real fast to the second floor. And this floor right here that we're going to talk about, tourists can't see this. We have the Queen's bedroom, and I thought I had a diagram of this. That's the family dining room that I was just talking about. Here we go. This right here is the yellow room, which fits in that bow. And there is a treaty room, and there is Lincoln's bedroom and the Queen's bedroom. And then, of course, there's the family dining room, the real family dining room, where they actually eat when they eat inside, with a kitchen. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is that hallway. You see that hallway? There it is. Connects all the rooms. And there is a yellow oval room, and that room right there is really a living room for the president and the first family. It's also where he meets with diplomats, people who are people of honor, and he leaves there and goes downstairs to greet other people. The yellow room, I could talk about it later because my slides are different. This right here is the Queen's room. It's a bedroom, and the Queen, they call it the Queen's room because 7 queens have stayed there, including Elizabeth II of Great Britain, and also, what's his name, the guy that came from England, Winston Churchill. He stayed in this room a lot too. He stayed a whole lot in World War II in the White House. And this room, the Queen's room, has been decorated several times. And this, I think, is the postmodernist era. Here it is again. You can see how much it's changed. And then this is the president that we have now, Trump. This is his interpretation of the Queen's room. There's a sitting room right next door to the Queen's room, and they use that as well. Now, this is the Queen's sitting room, and it was decorated by Jackie Kennedy, and not one thing has been done to it yet, which I foresee that somebody's going to come in there and make it match the bedroom. But that is the Queen's room. Now, this right here is Lincoln's bedroom. You can see it doesn't look much like a bedroom, but that was in the 1860s. This is Lincoln's bedroom right here. And Lincoln's bedroom is probably the most popular bedroom of all. I will say that the Obamas rented it out for $400 a night. And, you know, people would laugh at that or whatever, but if you could afford it, or if you could do that, I'm sure you probably would want to do it if it would be easy for you to get to. But that is Lincoln's bedroom. And after the Truman renovation, he said in 1952, go over the whole White House and anything that belongs to Lincoln, bring it and put it in this room right here. And then Laura Bush in the early 2000s redecorated this area. And she and a curator studied everything about Lincoln, and they brought everything together. And all his documents, everything, his bed, which was not really, there before, and all sorts of objects that Mary Lincoln had bought for the White House. And today, this bedroom is the only room dedicated to a single president, the only one. And it's odd, though, that Lincoln never, ever stayed in this, because his only claim to fame to this room was it was his cabinet room. And his staff members, they had offices here. So he never slept here, but he didn't sleep in that room, and he also never slept in that bed, but it's called the Lincoln bed. He was quite perturbed at his wife for buying that bed because it was quite expensive. And I will say that the morning after he was assassinated, they laid him on this bed temporarily. But his son died in that bed in 1862. Grover Cleveland's daughter was born in that bed, and Teddy Roosevelt's daughter had her appendix out in that bed. And a lot of the other presidents claimed that bed to sleep in, every night. But Lincoln never slept there, but it's his bed. It's a famous bed. It is almost 9 feet long, almost 6 feet wide, and its headboard stands 8 feet tall. So it's the most...
I'm curious about the fact that they would charge $400 for it, but then who would get that money?
I guess they would.
Interesting.
I'm probably it would go into the White House coffers. I don't know. I don't have a clue. But it was something that a lot of people expressed an interest in. They have a fascination with this bedroom. It is truly the most popular bedroom, probably in the whole U.S. That's the way it looked when Laura Bush redecorated. They did a lot of research for this room. That's the bed, the famous bed. That's the sitting room at one time. And that's the same sitting room. And that's the same sitting room. But those two rooms are the most important. Now this is the yellow room I was talking about. That's what it looked like because it was an office at one time. Now today it looks like this and this. And it's just such a beautiful room. I think that's why I have so many pictures of it. I just love it. And this is the Trump's interpretation of the Yellow Room. Like I said, dignitaries are brought here before they're presented for an occasion. And it's used as a regular living room for the first family as well. Then I love this room. This room this is not the room I love. This is the president's dining room. This is where he eats his regular meals. And that's another interpretation of the same room. But this is the room I'm talking about. This room right here was decorated by Jackie Kennedy. And it's called the Treaty Room. And it's the most historic room in the White House because this room is where President William McKinley in 1898 ended the Spanish-American War. The Treaty Room, there was a treaty signing. President McKinley ended the war. In the 1960s, John Kennedy signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And it's also the room where James Monroe drafted the Monroe Doctrine, which demanded that the Europeans stay out of the Western Hemisphere in 1823. And so it's quite historical. Today, it serves as the President's home office. There's a lot of work done in this room right here. And it's decorated, probably with every administration, because it really is heavily trafficked. And this is made to look like Ulysses S. Grant's cabinet room. And Ulysses S. Grant bought that table for his cabinet, and he bought some other pieces. And then later, you can see that this room has been redecorated, but there's that table. And this is George Bush, he's working, and there's that table again.
He's working.
Yeah, he's working.
Yep. That's another hallway. Like I said, it connects the two sides of the house. And that's another view of it. This hallway connects the sitting rooms on both sides of the White House. They have those big arch windows. And there's I think that's the west sitting room. And that hallway leads to the east sitting room. And this is what it looked like in the 1800s. You can see the heavy ferns and that sort of thing. But those are the two arch windows on both sides, east and west. And again, this is the Yellow Room, the Treaty Room. And there's the Lincoln Room and the Lincoln Sitting Room, and the Queen's bedroom and the Queen's Sitting Room. And then if you notice, there are other things here. There's where the President of the United States sleeps at night, if he's at home, and his private sitting room. And then you have, like I said, the dining room and the kitchen, and you have several other bedrooms. And there is the east sitting room and the west and the center hallway. And then, I think I mentioned this, but Truman had a balcony built when he was doing his renovation, and there that is on the second floor. And you can come at it from several rooms, but especially the Yellow Room. And then this right here, we're going to go up one more floor. This
But
last
you didn't
floor.
mention the cosmetology room.
Yes, there is a beauty parlor there too.
Oh, a beauty.
It's
I was
the same thing.
imagining with cosmetology.
Yeah. And we're going to go up one floor, and that's going to be this room. There's a solarium, glassed room. You can see beautiful views from this room. And there's the promenade, which is an outside walk. And they have several bedrooms, a game room, a music room, a workout room, and storage area. So that also belongs to the first family. All right, then I want to go over this real fast. We're almost finished. West wing, we're going to go outside. That's really the west wing over there, even though it's in the east direction on this picture. Remember Roosevelt built one and it burned down, and then FDR came along and he built a bigger one? Within that building right there, it's 3-story, there it is. That's a diagram of it. You've got the Oval Office, the Cabinet Room, the press briefing room, and that's the one we probably see the most of on TV. Those rooms, the Situation Room is not on this diagram because it's on another floor. But I want to go over the Oval Office. This is what the Oval Office looks like when there's no furniture in it at all. And you know the Oval Office usually is redecorated every time a new president comes in. And they can decorate it any way they want to. They can put up their favorite pictures and their favorite mementos, and special collections, whatever they want. One of the things they choose is their desk. And most presidents choose the Resolute desk that was given to President Hayes by Queen Victoria. And this was in the 1800s, 1880. And it was built from the timber of the HMS Resolute ship, and that's the desk. I don't know if you all remember that famous picture of John Kennedy sitting behind the Resolute desk and the little kids were playing, and the little boy, John Jr., came out of this, the panel moves, and he came out. But that is the desk that they usually use, and that's the one that was found in all the broadcasting equipment. And then this shows you the different decorations of the Oval Office. And I don't know which one, that was Obama's. That's John Kennedy's, but you see the open. And then Lyndon Johnson, God bless him, he was a media freak. He had to have the TV, and you know we had 3 major stations then. And so he has them all there, and he was just, and because of the Vietnam War, basically, he had to keep up with that all the time. Then there's a Situation Room, and this is a situation, oh sorry, one more, Reagan and Bush. This right here is a Situation Room. This is a war room. This is a very highly sensitive room. And anything that is global or national, some crisis or whatever, is discussed in that room. And it has all the technology that you could imagine. And this is a picture of these people in the Situation Room. There is Obama and there is Hillary Clinton. And you might know some others. They were watching to see if U.S. forces took down bin Laden. That's what they were viewing in that Situation Room. And then that is the briefing room. That's what we see mostly on TV. And that's where the presidential press secretary stands, and she responds to reporters and that sort of thing. Now notice how long and skinny that room is. And the reason for that is it's over a lap pool. This pool. That's the one that FDR put in the White House, and there were children all over America who donated dimes to a fund that put that pool in the White House. So next time you see a briefing, think the pool's still alive, it's underneath. Because Richard Nixon floored that pool. He's the one that, he put a floor over it and made it into that room. Because the press is growing over and over. And that pool's still under there. Of course, it's full of wiring now, not water. But in the 1970s, Gerald Ford put a pool on the outside. I think it's near the North Lawn. The other thing I wanted to mention is the East Wing, and that is that. And FDR built that, and he wanted it to be a museum, but it turned out to be World War II offices. And then after that, it became the offices of the social staff, including the First Lady. And there's a security detail there, as well as entrance to the White House tours. So if you want to go to the White House, you have to go in this way, go down that colonnade into the public floors. And also, underneath that is the presidential bunker. This is to provide security for the president, certain officials, his family, and it's guarded by around-the-clock military. and it's called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, POC, is what we call it today. And supposedly it's buried deep underground. Some sources say 20 feet. I don't even know what that is. 20 feet underground, but we really don't know because it's supposed to be secret. And that ends the tour. And don't ask me any questions. I don't know if I can answer.
Here's a simple one probably. If you would be invited for a Christmas party at the White House, where would you have been?
Probably you would go in the entrance hall, or maybe from the other side. Maybe to the east room, maybe that. But I think you'd probably be received in. Now, that's if I have some standing. If I'm just an ordinary person, I wouldn't be invited, but if I were invited,
Well,
I'd have
if you
to go.
were like FBI or if you
Oh,
were
yeah.
a secret.
Well, you'd probably be a guest, so you would go in the entrance hall or the dignitary, diplomatic room. One of those two rooms, probably you would go into. And also, you see where that projecting bow is? That lawn in front of the south part of the White House is where Marine One lands, the helicopter. It lands there. So that gives you perspective. But, and also, do you all know how much the president makes?
400.
Yeah,
$400,000 a year. He gets $50,000 his allowance, and then he gets $100,000 if he's going to redecorate. And you also know that there are ghosts in the White House. Reputable people have even reported that there are ghosts in the White House. It must be Abigail Adams, and, Lincoln, and like that. And also, do you know what money shows the image of the White House? There's money, paper money.
Paper money.
$100 bill.
No, $20 bills. And a lot of people don't use cash now, so why would you know? But on the back of it is the $20 bill. On the back, it's got the White House. And also I wanted to mention too, there are bunches of tunnels under the White House. And they're supposed to be secret, but we know of several. And also, I forgot to mention, to tell you that, there's so many offices in the East Wing and the West Wing. And they've overflowed. So they've got offices, presidential offices, across the street in the Treasury building and also in the Eisenhower building. That big gray building, it's just full of offices that belong to the president. So, yes, he's got a big job. And also, there are replicas of the White House. There's a 16,000 square foot house in Atlanta. And it looks just like the White House, and there's one in McLean, Virginia. And there's also one that looks almost exactly like the White House, and it's almost the same size as the White House in Iraq. And there's one in China, and there are other places. But most of the replicas are really small, but the one in Iraq is almost the same size. I thought that was interesting. But anyway, that's all.
Thank you.